Hey guys, I hope you had a great holiday break, even if you don't celebrate Easter. I hope it was somewhat restful. We've had like a lot of time off, or at least it's been a lot of time off for our particular class. You may have noticed that the scenery behind me is different. I remembered that there was a desk downstairs beneath the stairs, so I commandeered it and put it in the third bedroom. And this is now where I'm working. It's a little bit better than at the kitchen table, although I don't have that lovely painting behind me anymore. We're starting on the last book for our course, and that is Three Dark Crowns by Kendare Blake. This book is one in a series of four. So whenever you get to the ending, you'll notice it's a little bit of a cliffhanger because the book that comes next kind of follows up where this one leaves off. And it is specifically a YA or young adult novel. So it's written with kind of an older teenage audience in mind. Nonetheless, I think that this is a novel that adults can really enjoy too, because for reasons that we will get into, it's really kind of complex and interesting. Sometimes the characters are kind of fascinating. Sorry, I'm still trying to figure out how to adjust my screen now that I'm like kind of at a different level than I was in the dining room. Okay, so again, I think the plot is pretty straightforward, but just in case you're confused, essentially what happens in the world of Three Dark Crowns is that this is set on an island nation called Fennbirn, which is surrounded by some kind of mist, and most of what the Fennbirn residents call the mainland does not actually realize that this island exists in the middle of the ocean. Actually, it's kind of an inland sea, I think. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. And on this island, people receive what are called gifts, and there's 5 different ones you can get. You can be a naturalist, where you kind of commune with nature, you can make things grow, you have strong connections to animals, etc., etc. You can be an elemental, where you can control the elements: water, wind, fire, air. Think Avatar: The Last Airbender. I hope you guys have seen Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you haven't, it is Nickelodeon at its peak. There's also poisoners, who can heal but also can poison, and are supposed to have a resistance to toxins. We know that there's something called the War Gift, which is apparently very rare now. And then there's also seers, although they are also very rare, and we're told that they can see the future, but this often causes like paranoia and also for someone to lose their mind. And so in the world of Three Dark Crowns, there's a goddess, and she kind of imbues a matriarchal line of queens with her essence. And the queen rules over the island with a king consort who is from the mainland, and eventually the goddess will send her triplets. Sometimes there's 4 children, and we hear about that. I'm not sure if you hear about it in this book or if you hear about it in the second one. They all kind of mash together for me sometimes because I've read them multiple times. But for our purposes, let's just say they have triplets. They're usually each a naturalist, a poisoner, and an elemental, which is the case here. And what happens on the island is once they reach their 16th birthday, not long afterward, there's a celebration, and then they all try to kill each other until the one triplet reigns supreme. And she becomes the island's next queen, and then the cycle continues and continues and continues. Apparently, it's been like that for all of Fennbirn's history. And so we open up in this novel right before the queen's 16th birthday. We have 3 queens. You can check them out on the character list, but they are Arsinoe, Mirabella, and Catherine. And they are all quite different characters. And all very interesting. It's also fascinating if you end up liking this book and you decide to read the entire series, which I do recommend. It's really interesting to see all 3 of their character arcs They're kind of intense. Speaking of kind of intense, something else you may have noticed about this book is that I think a lot of the novel, this is true for a lot of the novels that we've read, but I don't think you expect it as much in a young adult novel, is how brutal the lives are that our characters are leading. There's lots of just murder, lots of unflinching torture, even towards the queens themselves. And so we can kind of start on that note and talk about the brutality of the world of Fennbirn. And we can start right off the bat. It happens right on page 1 with Catherine. So I'm going to read from the bottom of page 1 till about 3/4 of the way through page 2. So this is Genevieve. She studies the queen with distaste, her eyes dragging across every imperfection, her hollow cheeks, her pallid skin, the scabs from a rubbing of poison oak that still mar her right hand, but no scars. They're always careful about that. Let's go ahead and skip down. Genevieve lifts a lock of Catherine's hair, then she pulls it hard. Catherine blinks. She has been prodded back and forth by Genevieve's hands since she stepped onto the block, jerked so roughly at times that it seems Genevieve wants her to fall so she can scold her for the bruises. Genevieve pulls her hair again. At least it's not falling out, but how can black hair be so dull and she is still so small? You would think as like someone who is going to be a future monarch, who is currently considered a queen, all 3 of them are considered queens, that they would be treated with reverence, but the triplets are not. Here, Catherine is almost treated as like an animal. This always reminds me of like whenever people go to see horses and they like check out their hooves and their teeth and everything and they run their hands over them and they're like, oh, this is bad, but this part's good. That's kind of what Genevieve in particular, and Natalia too, to some extent, are doing to Catherine here. And the casual way in which like Genevieve just yanks on her hair and Cat just kind of stands there like, oh, this is what's happening now, shows you that Cat is actually used to this kind of treatment. She's used to being belittled physically and emotionally. And they can get away with it. This kind of opens up and shows us immediately the kind of world that we're living in, and it is not a nice one. Let's continue with this on page 11. I'm skipping over some of the most brutal moments too, because there's just like specific passages that I think are really interesting. It's also worth noting the kind of brutality of Cat and how whenever she poisons that boy who is a prisoner who says, I only murdered that guy because he killed my sister, and she makes a poison and just watches him die along with Natalia. And I think it's before that Mirabella is asked by the temple to perform a ritual sacrifice. So she literally buries a novice priestess alive. And she doesn't enjoy it. Cat is kind of like, I'm used to this. Mirabella is a much more kind of sensitive character than her sister Catherine, and she did not enjoy the experience. But nonetheless, she was asked to do it, and do it she did. But let's go ahead and look at page 11, and I'm going to start with the 3rd paragraph here. Catherine's ears prick at the mention of Queen Camille. Despite being raised as Camille's foster sister, and Camille was Cat, Arsinoe, and Mirabella's mother. Natalia almost never talks about the previous queen, Catherine's mother, though Catherine does not think of her that way. Temple doctrine decrees that queens have no mother or father. They are daughters of the goddess only. Besides, Queen Camille departed the island with her king consort as soon as she recovered from giving birth, as all queens do. The goddess sent the new queens, and the old queen's reign was ended. Still, Catherine enjoys hearing stories about those who came before. The only story about Camille that Natalia tells is the story of how Camille took her crown. How she poisoned her sister so slyly and quietly that it took them days to die. How when it was over they looked so peaceful that had it not been for the froth on their lips, you would have thought they had died in their sleep. Natalia saw those peaceful, poisoned faces for herself. If Catherine is successful, she will see 2 more. This is really interesting because this kind of murder is commonplace and actually sanctioned by their religion. this is how their world functions. Queens are expected to be murderous and kill their sisters, and that is how they prove their worth to the island. And this is kind of fascinating in a matriarchal society, because usually if we're talking about traditional gender roles, we associate violence with men. And so you would think under a patriarchal system that something like this would happen. And under patriarchal systems it has. But in the world Kendare Blake has created, which is, as Natalie's PowerPoint tells us, a matriarchy, the way in which these women prove their worth to rule is by killing one another. And book 2 really, you see some of them trying in this book, but book 2 is really where things go crazy and they start trying to murder each other. And you can see that Catherine is like, this is just what I do. This is how I handle it. And the island's inhabitants expect them to do it as well, and they will celebrate it. You have lots of like people that are close to Kat and Mirabella and Arsinoe thinking fondly about how and when they will murder their sisters. They're being asked to do something that is really horrifying, and in the island's eyes, it's this kind of rite of passage to become a great leader. Oh dear. As I was rereading this, I was reminded of how intense these books are. Let's flip to page 18 very quickly. I'm going to read about half the page here, starting at the top. This is, I believe, at the Gave Noir, which is a shit show for Kat. We'll talk about it. And she's just met Peter, who ends up becoming a really pivotal character in her storyline. I think he's asking her, what is he asking her about? About just if she's ready to start the process of becoming queen, which essentially means, are you ready to start killing your sisters? Okay. I will face it as I have to, Catherine says, and Peter chuckles. So much dread in your voice. I hope you can muster a bit more enthusiasm when you meet your suitors. It will not matter. Whichever king consort I choose, he will love me when I am queen. Would you not rather they love you before then? He asks. I should think that is what anyone would wish, to be loved for themselves and not their position. She is about to spout the appropriate rhetoric. Being queen is not a position. Not just anyone can be queen. Only her or one of her sisters is so linked to the goddess. Only they can receive the next generation of triplets. But she understands what Peter means. It would be sweet to be cared for despite her faults and to be wanted for her person rather than the power she comes with. So Catherine, I guess, is also kind of a brutal realist, as so much of the island is, in that she realizes whoever my husband becomes, my king consort, he's not going to actually love me. He's going to marry me because he has to. It'll give his family on the mainland power and prestige. Really, I'm just getting married because that's what I'm expected to do, and eventually I will be expected to produce the next set of triplets. Queens have, and this becomes clearer as you read the series too, but you can see that queens are really tightly constrained. You would think that as the ultimate leaders in the island, minus the goddess, that they would have unlimited powers, but that's not the way that it is. They are very much curtailed by the traditions and expectations that are set in place for them. And Kat realizes those realities and is just like, that's the way that it's going to be. I don't expect to be loved. I expect to be a murderer. I expect to be poisoned into immunity by my caregivers. That's just how my life is. And finally, let's look at page 102, at least on this particular topic. This is really interesting. This is when this is from Mirabella's perspective, and she and her foster family, the Westwoods, so Sarah and Bree, and then Elizabeth, who she has just made friends with. Elizabeth is a novice or acolyte at the temple. They have gone to pick out just some clothes and things for the upcoming murderous celebrations. That's the best way to put them. We'll get to see some of them. They're very murderous. I want to look at the bottom of page 102. It seems a shame, says Bree, all those suitors and you can only choose one. We'll talk about Bree in a moment. And you can only choose one, but still, all those suitors. She shivers with pleasure. Sometimes I wish that I was a queen. Mirabella frowns. Don't ever say that. Everyone in the coach quiets at the tone of her voice. It was only a joke, Mira, says Bree gently. Of course I do not wish that. No one really wishes to be a queen. Which is interesting because throughout history we know that, especially in England's history, wars have been fought because, oh my god, there's a Dalmatian being walked outside. OMG, he's so cute. Oh my god. Oh, he has lots of spots. Oh, I'm not distracted by the cat, and I'm distracted by dogs being walked. Okay. Back to the text. Jesus. Okay. No one really wishes to be a queen. Wars were fought over people who thought that they were better throughout our own history, that they would be the better ruler, they wanted the prestige, etc., etc., etc. But here we hear no one truly wishes to be a queen. Why? Well, it's because their lives are so brutal. There's so many expectations for them. They don't get to make a lot of their own choices. Let's talk about Catherine. I want to look at page 8. This isn't really a spoiler so much, but I'm going to tell you guys this. Catherine actually becomes the main villain throughout the entire series, which is interesting. So what this first book does is it kind of traces her journey to becoming a villainess, and how that affects everybody around her. And so I want to just talk about Kat's condition here, because it's interesting to note in relation to like her kind of overarching character arc into a villain. So right in the middle of page 8 is where I'm going to start. Giselle weaves Catherine's hair into braids and twists them high upon the back of her head, wrapping them around and around into a bun. Her touch is gentle. She does not tug. She knows that the years of poisoning have weakened the scalp. Catherine reaches for more makeup, but Giselle clucks her tongue. The queen is already powdered too white, an attempt to hide the bones that jut from her shoulders and to disguise the hollows in her cheeks. She's been poisoned thin. Nights of sweating and vomiting have made her skin fragile and translucent as wet paper. So in an effort to actually get her gift to manifest, which we know has not yet happened in this world, Natalia and Genevieve have spent their time poisoning Kat. And we see some of the ways in which they have done that. Almost every time that Kat is mentioned, or we see chapters from her perspective, she describes being poisoned again recently by her caregivers. That's, again, it's an attempt on their part to get her gift to manifest, but it's also, I mean, it's a kind of, she undergoes a lot of physical and mental abuse throughout the course of the novel. On pages 2 through 3, she imagines Natalia as a kind of mother figure, but only very briefly. Natalia is more of a taskmaster who insists that Kat do these things in order to ensure that the Arryns can remain in power. And Kat, the abuse that she has taken is physically represented on her body. Her hair is dull. She's very, very thin. You can see all her bones. She's often very pale. She has years of scarring, especially on her back and up her arms. And so she has been really kind of mistreated in an effort to ensure that she will become the next queen. And this is key because it's part of the reason that Kat becomes a villain in this novel. I'm not gonna look at it extensively because I don't want to make this video too long, but on pages 21 through 24 you also see what is supposed to be Kat's kind of rite of passage and proof to the world at large of her poisoner skills in the novel. And this is called the Gave Noir. She's supposed to eat a bunch of poisoned food, just like a total glutton. And of course, because she hasn't really manifested powers, it actually, the poison has an effect on her body. and she ends up vomiting all over herself and all over the floor, and all of the guests are just like, nope, and walk out. And then this happens on 24. Natalia says nothing. All Catherine can see are Natalia's clenched fists and the movement of her arms as she silently and furiously directs guests to leave the ballroom. Throughout the space, feet shuffle in a hurry to leave, to get as far from Catherine as they can. She sickens again and pulls on the tablecloth to cover herself. The ballroom darkens. Servants begin to clear the tables as another twisting cramp tears through her small body. Disgraced as she is, not even they will move to help her. So, because she didn't live up to the expectations that society, and in particular the Aaron family, has for her, she is left to be extremely ill and in pain and possibly die on the floor in the ballroom covered in her own vomit. Kat is really, really, really kind of abused by her caretakers. And we can see that Mirabella is to a certain extent as well. But Arsinoe has really not been. She was brought up by an extremely loving family. And on that note, let's talk about Arsinoe and Jules. Their relationship is really fascinating. Throughout all of the series, they remain steadfast friends, and it's really kind of cool to see these two women together. So I'm going to start on page 26 and continue on to 27, and we can kind of contrast Arsinoe's experiences with her powers with those of Kat's. So she's holding a rosebud in her hand. Arsinoe holds out her hand. Won't you help? To Jules, the rosebud looks like energy and possibility. She can smell every drop of perfume tucked away inside. She knows what shade of red it will be. Such a task should be easy for any naturalist. It should be especially easy for a queen. Arsinoe ought to be able to bloom entire bushes and ripen whole fields, but her gift has not come. Because of that weakness, no one expects Arsinoe to survive the Ascension year, but Jules will not give up, not even if it is the queen's 16th birthday and Beltane is in 4 months' time, falling like a shadow. Arsinoe wiggles her fingers and the bud rolls from side to side. Just a little push, she says, to get me started. Jules sighs. She is tempted to say no. She should say no. But that unbloomed bud is like an itch that needs scratching. The poor thing is dead anyway, cut off from its parent plant in the hothouse. She cannot let it wither and wrinkle still green. Focus, she says. Join me. Mm-hmm. Arsinoe nods. Arsinoe is like my favorite character in this series. She's such a turd. It does not take much, hardly a thought, a whisper. The rosebud pops like a bean skin in hot oil, and a fat, fancy-petaled red rose uncurls in Arsinoe's hand. It is as bright as blood and smells of summer. Done, Arsinoe declares, and sets the rose on top of the snow. And not bad either. I think I did most of those petals at the center. Let's do another, says Jules, fairly certain that she did it all. So whereas Kat has kind of been tortured as a way to get her powers to manifest, Arsinoe has just been guided and loved and helped. Jules is extremely close, and I mean, she does believe in her, and and this becomes clearer as we read the novel. Jules is dead set on protecting Arsinoe. She takes her role as protector of the queen, along with Camden, her mountain cat, really, really seriously. And here you see that Jules is constantly assisting Arsinoe. Arsinoe's like, I don't think I can do it by myself. Can you get me started? And Jules is like, yeah, okay, I'll help you. So this is a kind of pattern which has been replicated repeatedly for these two. And then let's go to pages 39 through 40. The other really interesting thing that we find out about Arsinoe and her childhood friends, Jules and Joseph Sandrin, besides the fact that Jules and Joseph Sandrin are like fated to be together, dun dun dun, okay, whatever, is that at one point, Jules and Joseph tried to help Arsinoe to escape the island so that she wouldn't have to live out the fate of a queen, which we already know is terribly brutal, as evidenced continuously by Kat. And because Arsinoe has people in her life who love her so dearly, which is way different from Catherine's experience, they tried to help her escape. So starting in the middle of page 39. It has been more than 5 years now since they tried to escape the island, since Joseph stole one of his father's day sailors and tried to helped them try to run away. Jules leans against Arsinoe's shoulder. It is the same reassuring gesture they have done since they were children. Right? Again, this kind of like touch for Arsinoe of care and familiarity, whereas when Catherine is touched, it is with pain. No matter what their attempted escape has cost them, Jules has never regretted trying. She would try again if there were any hope at all, but there is none. Beneath the dock, the sea whispers, just like it did against the sides of their boat as it held them captive in the mists that surround the island. No matter how they set the sails or worked the oars, it was impassable. They were found cold and scared and bobbing in the harbor. The fishers said they should have known better, that Jules and Joseph might have made it, to be lost at sea or perhaps to find the mainland. But Arsinoe was a queen, and the island would never let her go. There's a lot happening here that's interesting. Again, we see the kind of love and care that people extend to Arsinoe, which is so different from the experience of her sisters. And also you see the island kind of manifest itself as a character here. It's not, that they can't traverse the waters and get away. It's that the island won't let Arsinoe go. There is some kind of intimate connection between her as a queen and this landscape. And the medium through which that happens is, of course, the goddess. They get trapped in the mist, and it's almost like the island just refuses to let them go. It makes things impassable. So if we look at this from an eco-critical perspective, the island is kind of turned into this villainous force that ensures that the cycle of queendom continues and that the matriarchy itself is upheld on the island. Let's talk about Mirabella. Mirabella is interesting. If you guys, you might not end up liking Mirabella throughout this book for a very specific reason, which I think you'll find out in the next section that we read. I have a friend who is also a fan of these books, and she was reading them basically at the same time I was, and she got so mad, like really mad at Mirabella for kind of, decent reasons. Oh boy. Mirabella is very different from her sisters for a lot of reasons. She's supposed to be absolutely gorgeous, first off. Arsinoe is Arsinoe. She's kind of tomboyish. She doesn't really care about her appearance. She hangs out with a mountain lion. Like, she just doesn't give a fuck. Kat's, beauty has been blunted because of the physical torture that she has endured with the poisoning. But Mirabella is supposed to be gorgeous, and whereas her sisters have not manifested any powers, Mirabella has not only manifested powers, but they're extremely intense. And we see that in the very first section from her perspective, where she's kind of putting on a performance for people on the night of her birthday. She is also different from her sisters in that, as becomes clear throughout the novel and is reiterated in later novels in this series, the queens aren't really supposed to remember their sisters. They're separated whenever they're children, so memories could potentially form, but they're not supposed to really remember one another, which helps to prevent them from loving one another and thus make it easier for them to kill each other. Mirabella, however, remembers her sisters, and she remembers them quite clearly. So let's look at the bottom of 94 through the top of 95. Some days later, Mirabella wakes from another dream with her mouth tasting of blood. In the dream, she, Arsinoe, and Catherine had been children. She remembers black hair fanned out in water and dirt on Arsinoe's nose, right? These little kind of details about her sisters. She remembers her own hands turned to claws and tearing Arsinoe and Catherine apart. She rises up on her forearms from being face down in her pillows. It is midday and her room is empty. Perhaps there are not even any priestesses lurking outside her door, since Sarah Bree and the other Westwoods are... I knew it was going to happen. Sorry. And the other Westwoods are all at home. That's all I get for petting the cat right before doing this. The dreams are coming more frequently. They wake her 2, sometimes 3 times a night. Luca said to expect them. Luca is the head priestess. that they would show her the way to murder her sisters. Fantastic! She did not warn her of the dread they would make her feel. Ugh, okay. Mirabella closes her eyes, but instead of darkness, she sees the face of the sacrifice priestess in the rocks. She sees Arsinoe's dirty nose and hears Catherine's laugh, right? These kind of memories that have lodged themselves in Mirabella. Queens are not supposed to love their sisters. She has always known that, even when they were together at the Black Cottage, where she had loved them anyway. They are not those children anymore, she whispers into her hands. They are queens. They must die. What's interesting about this is, again, Mirabella, unlike her sisters, remembers her sisters and loves them deeply. Arsinoe and Catherine, whenever they think of their sisters, in Arsinoe's case, she's like, well, I just expect to die. That's how it's going to be. And Jules is like, I will bitch slap you. Stop it. And Catherine's like, I must murder them, and I will do it in the most extreme way possible, because that's how Cat has been raised. Whereas Mirabella has these dreams, and she remembers her sisters. She remembers that dirt on Arsinoe's nose. She remembers Catherine's hair and her laugh. She has these really intimate memories of being with her sisters whenever they were young children, before they were separated. And Xfinity from Comcast is outside the window now. And she remembers the love that she had for them. And apparently she still feels some of that love. And she struggles with what her duty is going to be, which is that she's going to have to kill her sisters. And she keeps telling herself, they're not those kids anymore. They're not my little sisters. I have to kill them. I have to kill them. I have to kill them. And you're going to see her continuously struggle with this fact throughout the book. Okay. And then the last thing I want to talk about today is desire and sexuality on Fennburn. And this is reiterated throughout the novel, that there are kind of different expectations of desire and whether or not somebody has done the deed. And it's really interesting to kind of look at Bree as an example of this. Bree Westwood, who is Mirabella's close friend and her companion whenever she was growing up, and who is, to put it lightly, absolutely boy crazy to an extent that it actually becomes annoying sometimes. So I'm going to look at the last part on page 96, and then we'll skip over to the bottom of page 97. I hope the tailor from 3rd Street brought that handsome son of his, Bree says. I thought you were seeing the Wexton boy, says Sarah. Bree snuggles back into the coach's velvet cushions. Not anymore. Since Mir's birthday, he's forgotten how to kiss. So much tongue. Okay. She shivers and gags and leans against Mirabella for comfort. Mirabella and Elizabeth laugh. Sarah says nothing, but her eyes bulge out and her lips practically disappear. And then let's skip over to 97 right here in the middle. Bree cranes her neck. Here he is, she says and grins. It is easy to see who she means. A handsome boy with light brown hair stands beside the jeweler near the end of the row. He has already seen Bree as well. It never takes you very long, Mirabella says quietly. Nor should it. I have had years of practice. Bree grasps Mirabella's arm in one hand and Elizabeth's in the other. We must find out his name. Enough of that, Sarah says. She unlinks the girl's arms and takes her place behind the queen. And then later, Bree works it so that she and Elizabeth get to go and keep warm around the brazier fire that they have behind their little stand. What's interesting about this is that whereas traditionally women have been silenced, their desire has been null. They're supposed to be virgins, for the patriarchal line to ensure that it continues. In this world, because it is a matriarchy, that's not important. Jules doesn't even really know who her father is. He's never even mentioned so far in the text. Doesn't even really matter. All that matters is her female lineage. She has her mother. She is Madrigal, right? She's a Malone. That's what matters. Here, Bree expresses her desire and sexuality often in very heterosexual terms, and all her mother really does is go, right? She doesn't silence her daughter. She's just like, knock it off. Just do that later, okay? Can you not do it right now? We have important queen business to get around. But, Bree isn't stopped. It's clear that she has been intimate with people before. And it's seen very, very differently. Women are allowed to express their desire and sexuality. Men are too, actually, in this world. Nobody is kind of held back from doing so, except for the queens, which I think you'll hear about later in this novel, because of course there are restrictions for the queens. Is there anything else that I wanted to say about that? I don't think so. So I hope you guys are enjoying the novel. I know it's really kind of strange, and Kendare Blake has a really kind of like particular writing style too. I don't always enjoy her writing style, although I really love character arcs and the kind of plots that she creates. That's really where her strengths are. She's not the best, like, technically skilled writer, though. But hopefully you can enjoy the characters, because they are varied and they're absolute dinglings a lot of the time. Again, Arsinoe is definitely my favorite character, and there will be many shenanigans with Arsinoe. She's just like a ball of chaos. Alright, you guys, I hope you enjoy and that you have a good weekend. Remember, your essay is due on Tuesday by midnight. If you have questions, you can email me. We can set up a Zoom or a Skype meeting. All you have to do is email me and let me know, and I'm happy to help you guys out. Alright, I hope you have a great day. Bye!